having an organization that exists to bring on new protocol developers and fund existing protocol developers brings much more benefit to Bitcoin than I could by writing code or reviewing code.
Hello there from Bedford in the United Kingdom. How are you all? Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by the Mighty Kraken, the best place to buy, sell and trade Bitcoin. I'm your host Peter McCormack, and today I've got an interview with John Newbery. We're going to be discussing the very important topic of funding open source development. But before that, I've got a message from my amazing show sponsors. Okay, we're going to kick it off with Casa, who are the best in Bitcoin security. Have you got your security sorted? You know, with Bitcoin hovering above 19,000, threatening to break through 20,000, some of you might be sat on a nice stack, or over the next year, some of you might be building up a nice stack. And it's really important you get your security together. About 6 months ago, I was the same. I was like, shit, I need to get this sorted. And I reached out to Casa and I got myself set up. And now I am protected from hackers, personal mistake, in-person attacks, device failure, and so much more. I didn't want to be one of those stories of somebody who screwed up and lost all their Bitcoin, and you don't want to be either. Now listen, Casa is so amazing. They've got a product for every Bitcoiner. With Casa Gold, you get triple the security of a hardware wallet, and that's for only $10 a month. With Casa Platinum, you get their 3 or 5 multi-sig. Now this is the best protection for large Bitcoin holders, and it comes at a really great price. And with Casa Diamond, you get their full service offering. This includes a customized personal security review, inheritance planning, and of course, their best-in-class security. There is no better time to upgrade your Bitcoin security and get that total peace of mind. Find out more at keys.casa, which is keys.casa. Next up, I'm going to talk to you about Otis. Now, Otis is an investment platform that makes it possible for almost anyone to invest in shares of cultural assets, from contemporary art to rare collectibles, sports cards, memorabilia, sneakers, comics, and much more. So here's how it works. You download the app and you can sign up for free. New assets are dropped in the app weekly for you to buy shares in. You can also buy shares of past drops from other Otis members. And you can earn a potential return if Otis sells the underlying asset for more than the price the item was dropped for, or by selling your shares to other Otis members on the Otis trading platform. I've signed up and checked it out. They've got some cool sneaker investments. They've got the 1985 Air Jordan 1 collection, and you know I love modern art, so it's great to see some art up there, including some Banksy work too. Right now, Otis is offering a free investment share to listeners of my show. All you have to do is go to withotis.com/WBD and sign up to get your first share for free when you fund your account. That is withotis.com, which is withotis.com/WBD. And lastly, let's talk about sportsbet.io. Come on, have you checked them out yet? They are the best place for online gaming because they accept Bitcoin, because they're badasses. But more than that, they're Bitcoin fans. I've told you this before. I went out to Estonia. I've hung out with the team. I've seen what they're doing with Bitcoin. They put a Bitcoin logo on a Premier League shirt. Yes, on the front of the Southampton shirt. And I'm going to get a few of those soon to give away because I love you all. Now with Sportsbet, you have every market you could possibly be interested in, from the Premier League to US sports. And for new customers, they have a range of promotions available. Just head over to sportsbet.io/promotions, and that is sportsbet.io/promotions. Okay, so onto the show today, and I've got John Newbery back on the show. And look, this is a really important topic. Yes, it might not be as exciting as talking about Bitcoin going to the moon, but the Bitcoin we love requires devs to be funded. John is a Bitcoin core developer, and when I last interviewed him, that was out in New York at Chaincode Labs where he was working. But he recently left the role there and is opening up a Bitcoin research and development center right here in London. Funding developers is something that we should all massively care about. If we want Bitcoin to be as successful as possible, we need to be able to attract the best developers. And when there is no central company or dev fund, this can be hard. It requires people like John to actively get out there and raise funds and distribute it. So where does the money come from? Ultimately, it's from the community and the companies that make money from Bitcoin who have an interest in it succeeding and chipping in and supporting developers. We're seeing more and more of this, which is really promising. You know, in a couple of my interviews recently, I asked Brian Armstrong of Coinbase and also the Winklevoss brothers, and both of them have started funding developers, which is cool, but we need more of it. So this is a super important show. I hope you listen to it. I hope you relay the messages out there. I hope you share it out there. Anyway, I'll let you listen to the show now. As ever, if you've got any questions, you want to reach out to me, my email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. As I say, I reply to everyone, and I've had a lot of emails recently, and I do get through them eventually. Outside of that, check out Defiance. Episode 4 of Chaos is out. That's at defiance.news. Also, looking at a couple of new brand launches next year, which could be quite interesting. Looking forward to 2021 because it has been an amazing year. Anyway, have a great weekend. Love you all. See you all next week. Morning, John. How are you?
Hi, Peter. I'm doing well. How are you?
Not bad. So last time we spoke, I flew all the way to New York to sit next to you and have a conversation. Now we're in a very different world where we're actually... I wouldn't really have had to get on a plane to come and see you right now, but we can't even sit in the same room.
Nope. It's 2020.
2020, man. So how's 2020 been for you?
It's been interesting. It's been interesting for everyone, but the biggest change has been moving back to the UK. So I'm currently back in London.
Yeah, why did you move back?
It was time. I left the UK in 2010, so it's been 10 years, and just wanted to be closer to family and friends.
Okay, fair enough. You glad to be back? Was settling back okay? You missing anything about the US?
Well, everything I miss from before March. My life in New York disappeared in March. Didn't get to go into the Chaincode office. Didn't get to do all the other things I love there. So, yeah, I miss them, but it's not. I don't miss them because I moved back to England. I miss them because they disappeared with the rest of the world. And yeah, it's nice to be back. It's interesting. It's not the same as when I left it. When I'm not seeing as many people as I thought I might, but that will change.
Well, at least you won't have such a bitter winter, because I can't remember if it was that trip I went on. I don't know how I'd done it. I must have been to the States around 10 times, and then I hit a winter in the States, and I'd never hit... For some reason, I'd never hit a winter. Those New York winters are so freaking cold.
Yeah, they're brutal. They can be. They really can be. A couple of years ago, it was very, very cold. Last year was not so bad, but yeah, it can be really cold there. So, I mean, UK's not so bad. Just got 4 months of rain ahead of us. So,
yeah, okay. After the last 4 months of rain, I'm sure we had a couple of weeks of sun. I'm pretty sure, but I was locked in the house like everyone else, so I didn't see it. Anyway, we're here to talk about development, open source dev. You're going to teach me everything about open source dev today. So I'll tell you where we'll start. Yeah, Bitcoin's now nearly 12 years old. Is it nearly? Yep. Is it? Yeah, nearly 12 years old. Mm-hmm. We've clearly got more people working on it than ever before.
Yep.
But we still don't have enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think more is needed. I was on a podcast recently, and the host asked me, "Is there enough funding for open source developers in Bitcoin?" And my answer there was that you can answer that question in lots of different ways. One is I look at the people who I think need funding right now, and I think they're mostly funded. So there's two sides to this. There's a supply of skilled and experienced protocol engineers, and then there's the supply of money to pay those people. And we need both to go up in concert. We can't, if we run ahead of the amount of skilled developers in funding, then all that additional funding will do is either go to unskilled developers, or will go to bidding up the price for the scarce asset, which is protocol developers. And if we run ahead in terms of the number of people who know how to develop the protocol without funding, then those people won't be able to support themselves. So we need both. We need to increase the number of people who can work on the protocol, and at the same time increase the funding so we can pay those people and they can do that for a living.
Do we know what the ratio is of those people who are funded in relation to those people who are kind of like hobbyist contributors?
I don't, but it's a power distribution. So if you look at the mailing list or the repository, there's a small number of people who do the vast majority of the contributions in terms of, I think one of the reasons is that as soon as you start making impactful changes, this is the thing that you want to spend all your time on, and you somehow find funding.
Yeah.
I think that's the same for most open source projects. It's a power distribution where most of the work is done by a small fraction of the people.
Is there anything else like Bitcoin where you have people contributing like this, but there's this active need to find funding for them. Is this the same as anything else?
I don't know other open source projects as well, but one thing that is different about Bitcoin is many of those other open source projects are centralized around some organization. It might be a foundation that is set up explicitly to guide and lead the development of that open source project, or it might be under the umbrella of some corporation that is creating an open source project, but is in charge and is guiding what happens with that open source project. So they have funding, they have centralization, they have kind of command and control of what's going on in that project. Bitcoin, I think, is unusual in that it's so decentralized, and the people who are working on it are not working for a Bitcoin foundation. That was tried, it didn't work. And then they're not working for a specific company that is in charge of Bitcoin. So we have this kind of distributed model of people working on the code, and that's pretty unusual, I think.
All right. When you have these kind of voluntary hobbyist contributors coming through, does it tend to? I know you said some people tend to find out they want to work on this and want to get funding, but is there ever a case where, someone like yourself or another lead contributor starts to notice someone's work come through, or a specific person think, oh, who is this person? And is there like a process to reaching out to them and talk to them and try and support them? Does that happen?
Yeah, it happens a lot. I do it a lot. There's no formal process because there's no real formal process for anything in Bitcoin. But I'm certainly always on the lookout for potential new talent, promising talent. And I mentor several people. I have calls with them every week and help them kind of develop in their contributions to Bitcoin. That kind of started when I was working on the residency at Chaincode. I was always on the lookout for potential candidates for the residency, and Adam Jonas does a lot of this as well. But it's continued since I left Chaincode that I'm always looking for people who I think have potential to contribute more.
Well, that was great, because I remember our last one, we sat down afterwards with 3 of the residents and I spoke to them, and then Amiti's now been on the podcast herself. And it's great to see someone make that kind of progression in the world of Bitcoin. The Chaincode thing is obviously very interesting and kind of unique in the way they've created their program. Is there anyone else doing anything similar to that?
Not yet, but that's a very good question to lead on to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the organization that I'm setting up called Brink. And this is specifically to, one, fund established Bitcoin protocol developers, and 2, to onboard and mentor new Bitcoin protocol developers. So it's going to be a completely independent organization. I've left Chaincode. It will be completely funded by donations and sponsorship from the public. And the goal there is to be an independent hub for Bitcoin protocol development.
So how is that different from Chaincode?
Different in terms of the funding model. So Chaincode is a private organization, research foundation that is funded by Alex and Suhas. And those guys have done so much for Bitcoin. They've funded open source development. They've funded the residency. They've funded Coin Center. They've done so much. And Brink is similar in terms of the goals that want Bitcoin to succeed and fund open source development, but it's different that we are soliciting funding from the public. And I think that independence is healthy for Bitcoin, to have a diverse set of funding models for organizations funding open source development. The other difference is Chaincode is predominantly a center for funding developers in New York. The residency was something that Matt Corallo started, and then I continued. It's not really the focus. It's become more of a focus for them. Brink will be one of the 2 explicit focuses is to onboard new contributors. So I'll spend a lot of my time mentoring and onboarding, and that's kind of central to the mission of Brink.
But it will all be remotely done?
The grants will be remote. So grants for established developers will be remote. That's the first part. The second part, the onboarding new contributors, that will all be in person, because that's the best way to learn. That's how you learn the fastest.
In London?
In London, yeah, that's the plan.
London, great. Well, I tell you what's interesting about that. It just makes me think of something like, bear with the analogy, but something like mining. At the moment, people constantly talk about the distribution of mining. Currently, it's kind of centralized around, historically centralized in China, and people would worry about something like that. So I guess what you're trying to do here is decentralize the onboarding of new developers. In that, like you say, New York is a hub. We could have a hub here in London. Wouldn't it be great if we had a few of these around the world?
That would be great, yeah. And ideally, in 5 or 10 years' time, that would be the case. That there will be lots of these Bitcoin development centers of different models, funded in different ways around the world. So there's no one single point of control now. I think Bitcoin development is currently more distributed than it ever has been, and I hope Brink will continue that trend, and we'll see it continue further afterwards.
Yeah, so how would you coordinate with Chaincode and say the people at Blockstream or anywhere else? I mean, how does everyone coordinate to ensure there isn't any kind of doubling up of work and people are kind of trying to head in the right direction? Does it work like that?
All of the coordination is through the Bitcoin Core project, and it's through open channels. So mostly through the GitHub repo or IRC, Internet Relay Chat. It's a text chat protocol, or the mailing list. And all of those things are open communication mediums. So anyone can go in and kind of audit the process of how decisions were made and how people, how code got merged into the code base, and if anyone disagreed, what they disagreed about. So it's all, it's pretty much all out in the open.
Okay, that's some quite big changes over at Chaincode then, because obviously you've moved on and Matt moved on to Square. As I'm aware, Peter Willey went over to Chaincode.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. So some quite big changes over there then.
Yeah, Matt left, I'd say, over a year ago to start at Square Crypto. I left last month because I moved back to London, and then Peter and also Mark Earhart moved to Chaincode. So yeah, a little bit of turnover, but we're all still working on the same goals, which is to make Bitcoin succeed.
So what's the status of Brink then? Are you just still early planning? When do you think you will be starting to issue grants?
Been planning for several months. The launch date is in November. So by the time your listeners are hearing this, we will have launched already.
Do you have an actual date?
Currently planning for next Tuesday, which is the 24th. But yes, been working on this for several months now. Have funding from I have initial funding from John Pfeffer and Vences Casares to get the project off the ground. And then I have funding for the first grant and the first fellowship position. So that will all be in the announcements, and hoping to announce our first fellow very soon.
Good old John Pfeffer.
Good old John Pfeffer, yeah.
Good old John. I love John. I haven't seen him since, I think it was LeBitConf. But I really, really like that guy. I think he does so much just in the background. He's such a great guy. Okay, so I've I don't know if you've listened to any of my interviews recently. I've been kind of like kicking and giving a bit of pressure to some people towards funding, and sometimes I'm being asked like, okay, where to put it, and like, I don't know. I've got no idea.
Well, now you do.
Well, now I do. So but that is interesting. So if people are wanting to fund, I could put them in, I guess, in your direction. I would have thought one of the things would be like, again, here's an interesting analogy. When we usually get those old magazines, like they were like newspaper inserts, and they used to have things like you could adopt a tiger in like Africa, or like and they would name it, or like maybe it would be like a dolphin, and they'll give it a name and say, well, you can adopt Daphne or whatever, and but you knew where you felt like you knew where your money was going, and you would get your letter every year and your birthday card from Daphne the dolphin or whatever. I think sometimes I could imagine people wanting to fund. Yes, they'd be interested in giving you a lump of money. I think if they knew exactly who they were funding, I mean, they probably don't need a birthday card, but do you think that kind of thing would be a possibility?
I'm not sure if we'll be able to offer adopting a Bitcoin protocol developer, but everything that we do will be out in the open. So transparency is going to run through this organization, all the way. You'll see who's being funded. There'll be regular updates of what those people are doing with the money. And the plan is this will be a 501c3 entity in the US. So we have an entity in the US already. We have filed for 501c3 status, and that means that's a non-profit charitable organization, and that means people will be able to give tax exempt, so they'll be able to write that off against their taxes, and that money will go towards funding Bitcoin open source development. So we will be the only organization that has that status that is 100% dedicated to Bitcoin protocol development. Currently, the Human Rights Foundation has something similar, but obviously they have a much wider mission and do a lot of things. Brink will be, hopefully, all things going well, will be a 501c3 where all of the money that comes in will go towards funding Bitcoin protocol development.
Yeah, I guess also with regards to protocol development, the HRF are quite focused specifically on privacy. They like supporting privacy projects, obviously with the work they're doing around the world, supporting human rights. Are there any specific areas of focus that Brink will have? Will it focus on the main protocol? Will it consider Lightning? Is there any kind of specifics?
Well, the first employee is me, and I work on Bitcoin Core and the base layer. So I expect that'll be a focus, but we are open to funding grants for any work on Bitcoin protocol, whether that's base layer or layer 2, things like Lightning, and kind of related technologies to Bitcoin, anything that's advancing Bitcoin.
Okay. What's it like for you going into this? Because this is a new kind of role for you then. If you are a protocol developer, but obviously you're going to have to be spending a lot more of your time on other things related, and potentially you may get to the point where you're doing a lot less development work if Brink really takes off. How do you feel about that?
I don't like it. I don't like the tedious admin work. I hope to outsource that to other people in the organization and outside the organization. But yeah, it's taking time away from my development. The reason I'm doing it is because I think it's important. No one else is starting an organization like this, as far as I'm aware. And I think it's probably the highest leverage thing I can do for Bitcoin. Having an organization that exists to bring on new protocol developers and fund existing protocol developers brings much more benefit to Bitcoin than I could by writing code or reviewing code. So that's why I'm doing this.
Sounds like a mission then.
It's a mission. Yeah, of course it is.
It's a mission. So what are you working on yourself then with Bitcoin right now?
Well, we have 0.21 coming out the door pretty soon. That's
John,
the next question.
You're saying that. You say that like I know what that is. Come on, man.
Okay, so Bitcoin Core is a software project, and we have releases every 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
And the next release will be 0.21, which we are in the final stages of putting together. That will be branched soon. Do you want me to explain what that means?
Yeah, go on. God, okay. I think I could make a guess, but I'd be embarrassed if I was wrong. So I'll let you explain it.
Okay. So in a software project, we use a code management system called Git, where changes get added to the code, and Git can have various branches. So there's a different kind of working versions of the code. The main branch we work on is called master, and that's where all of the latest development goes. And then at periodic intervals, we will create a new branch from that, which will be exactly the same as the pointed branches. And then those two branches would diverge. And that new branch is the release branch. So that new branch will be 0.21 in this case. We will probably do that this week. And then that 0.21 branch will go through some release candidates. That means we'll kind of package it up and people will test it. And assuming no bugs are found, that will be the final release. And if bugs are found, there'll be a new release candidate. But maybe there'll be 2 or 3 release candidates, and then there'll be a version of the software that people can run. So currently, the Bitcoin Core project is mostly focused on getting that 0.21 release out. And then as soon as that is branched, master then becomes the code that will eventually become 22. So there'll be new changes going into master.
What's coming in 21? Anything I would be interested in?
Oh, loads of stuff, Peter. It's a massive release. Yes.
Is this the Taproot one?
So Taproot is in there, the code for Taproot, not the activation. Okay. So Taproot won't be something you can use on mainnet with 21, but it is something you can use in test networks. So the code exists and it's been tested and reviewed. What else is coming in 21? Descriptor wallets and SQLite wallets. So these are quite big changes to the way the wallet is structured and backed by a database. We completely overhauled the way that transactions are requested across the P2P network. What else did we do? Compact blocks. So the Neutrino, BIP 157158 is now in Bitcoin Core.
Neutrino, is that like the mobile node thing?
Yeah, that's Neutrino is actually the name of the implementation from Lightning Labs, but the protocol allows a light client to download what's called a filter for each block. So you can have a light client that is downloading a filter, which might be like 40K instead of a megabyte. And that filter, the client will be able to tell from the filter whether there are any transactions in that block that they're interested in, and then download the full block.
Okay. Should probably remind people what Taproot is.
Oh, okay. Well, Taproot is a future soft fork that may or may not happen. We assume it will happen. The previous soft fork was SegWit, and this is SegWit version 1 scripts. And there are 2 parts to it. There are Schnoor signatures and there's Taproot. And Schnoor signatures are a new kind of signature. Well, new for Bitcoin. They've been around for 30 years or so. And they actually predate ECDSA, which is the current signature format we use in Bitcoin. But Schnoor signatures are better in basically every way. The way they've been implemented in Bitcoin Core means the signatures and public keys are more compact. You can do fun tricks with them, like signature aggregation, which is not really possible with ECDSA. So you can put multi-sig inside one signature, for example. And lots of cool stuff like that. The other part of it is Taproot, which is a way of putting multiple scripts into one output. And then when you spend, you only have to use one of the scripts, or you can use just a single signature. And that means you can have much more complicated contracts, and you don't need to reveal all of the conditions of that contract when you spend from that output. So it's really good for kind of more advanced functionality. It's really good for privacy because you're not revealing very much. It's good for scalability because the footprint on the chain is a lot smaller. It's good for fungibility because everything looks the same. It's just a whole load of really cool stuff. And it can be used in things like Lightning or other contracts. And I expect once it's in, if it gets in, it will take the Lightning people and other people writing smart contracts on Bitcoin, several years to get through all of the potential benefits you can get from Schnoor and Taproot. It just makes everything better.
Next up, I talked to John more about funding Bitcoin development, but before that, I got a message from my super amazing sponsors. Okay, we're going to kick off with Kraken, my favorite place for buying and selling Bitcoin. It's the only place I use right now for buying and selling Bitcoin. You want to know why, right? Right, a couple of key things. Firstly, they are consistently rated the best and most secure cryptocurrency exchange. They also have the best in class in customer service. So if you've got any issue, whatever it is, whoever you are, whatever you are, if you reach out to them, they're going to get that fixed for you. Also, if you want to start trading Bitcoin, they have every possible tool you could need. So whatever your level of experience, if you sign up at kraken.com, you can start trading Bitcoin. It could not be easier. They also have a beautiful mobile first app, so you can trade Bitcoin on the go. And with their margin trading, futures, and OTC desk, Kraken has every option covered for you. There is no better place to trade Bitcoin. You can find out more at kraken.com or download the app. It's available for the iPhone and Android. Just search for Kraken Pro, which is KrakenPro. And lastly, but never least today, is my good friends over at BlockFi. And did you hear their amazing new massive announcement? Yes, BlockFi is about to launch a Bitcoin rewards Visa credit card. It's coming in early 2021. I've been very excited about this. I've known about it for a while. I literally cannot wait for this. So check this out. Card users can earn a market-leading 1.5% rewards in Bitcoin for all their card purchases. There is a $200 annual fee, but there's a $250 bonus of Bitcoin if you spend $3,000 in the first 3 months. So you can stack sats with all your card purchases. Now, waitlist registration is open for registered BlockFi clients, and if you want to join the priority waiting list, then you need to open up a BlockFi account. The public waiting list is slated to open in early January. I cannot wait to get my card. Now, if you're interested in checking BlockFi out, I recommend you do your own research and then head over to blockfi.com, which is blockfi.com. Look, I don't spend too much time in the technical sides of Bitcoin, but I notice there is a lot of excitement around Taproot. It's beyond me, but I also noticed there seemed to be like some nerves around activating Taproot. I've seen some people on Twitter saying, come on, let's just go with it, and other people just a little bit nervous. I saw one thread relating to a potential issue with it. I can't even remember what it was so long ago. What is that kind of status, and what's the nervousness around it?
I think the nervousness is post 2x trauma. That's it all got very politicized around SegWit, and no one wants to be in charge of Bitcoin. None of the developers want to be in charge of Bitcoin. They don't. That's not the point. Nobody wants to put themselves there, and so no one wants to step up and say this is how Taproot will be activated. That's the main thing. I think the technical changes are. I haven't seen any serious opposition to them. They're just generally good, and they make Bitcoin better. So it's not really a technical question; it's more of a social question of actually how do you do it? How does a decentralized system kind of reach a decision point and make a change?
Well, how does it? What's your view?
I'm not in charge of Bitcoin, Pete, so I can't tell you that.
But, you want me to do it.
It will be the problem with the way SegWit was activated, I think, for most people, is that it gave the false impression that the miners chose what Bitcoin was, and they chose when changes would happen, and they got to define Bitcoin. That was never the intent, but it was one of the it was one interpretation of that activation method. And that is not the case. Miners are not in charge of Bitcoin. Users are, economic nodes are. And so people want to avoid that. People don't want to avoid another kind of 2x war and giving the impression that miners get to choose what Bitcoin is. So I think the way it will activate is the way a lot of people are thinking about it is it will be similar to SegWit. It will be similar to Bit9. But there will probably be a flag day upgrade after some time. So there will be the normal miner signaling, and if it hits a threshold, then it will activate after the next retarget. But if we don't hit the signaling, then we will upgrade anyway after a year. It'll be kind of a flag day. So in advance, we'll say this is the date of the upgrade. But I don't know. That stuff is still to be hashed out. 0.21 puts the code in, and then the decisions and the conversations about activation come after that.
Are there any risks with the activation?
Yes. There is. If some people activate and others don't, then you can have depending on exactly how that happens, you could have a chain split.
Okay.
Which is something that we want to avoid. So UASF is something that happened for the SegWit activation, user activated soft fork, and that was a bunch of Bitcoin users saying that after this date, we're going to enforce this rule. So if miners aren't enforcing it, they will be mining invalid blocks. And that carries the risk of a chain split, because the miners could continue to mine blocks which are valid according to the old rules, but not valid according to these UASF nodes. And so the UASF nodes follow one chain, and the other nodes that have not activated SegWit in that case would follow another chain, and that's a chain split.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to avoid that. I mean, I don't understand it, and I'm pretty sure most of the stuff I won't even see it. It'll all be baked into the lovely tools that people provide for me. But it's very interesting to hear about it, and I can imagine also it must be quite stressful for certain developers working on this, because if you were to make a decision that would lead to a chain split or a major bug, we're back at $16,383. There's a lot of value held in Bitcoin now. I would not want that kind of responsibility. Does it feel stressful sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not sure if I use the word stressful, but
pressure,
yeah, responsibility. No one wants to put a bug into Bitcoin Core, either at consensus. I mean, consensus level would be the worst, because that can result in a chain split. But even in the wallet, if you put a bug in there, you can cause people to lose money. In the P2P code, if you put a bug in there, you can cause a network to fail or split in some way. So it is quite high stakes. And going back to your question about is there enough funding for Bitcoin, or are enough people working on it? If you look at you said 16,300, what does that mean? Like $250, $300 billion aggregate value of the network. And there's maybe 10 or 20 people working full time on Bitcoin Core.
Is that true?
In terms of full time, probably, yeah, I'd say in the order of 20. Now, there's a lot of people working on adjacent projects. There's people working on libsecp. There's people working on Lightning. There's people working on BTC Pay Server. But if you added up all of the people who are full time on Bitcoin or a very closely related project, it would certainly be less than 100, probably less than 50, I would guess.
Wow.
Which doesn't seem like that many if you think about an economy worth $300 billion. Maybe we should get more.
Well, I mean, it just requires more pressure on people who are benefiting from it to be able to contribute. I mean, I spoke to Brian Armstrong, and he was very open to it during the interview. I mean, I wouldn't say I railroaded him, but I did just put it out to him, and he's like, yeah, and he stuck to his word. And he went out and he did it, and they're now funding a couple of people. I know the Winklevoss brothers are looking to do the same. So I guess what I need to do is I need to go on probably a exchange roadshow.
Yeah, take the tin.
Put that killer question into everyone, and then send them your way. But yeah, no, you're making a really valid point, because everyone has a interest in doing this. Everyone should be interested in doing this. I do think sometimes though, are there scenarios where funding can dry up? Like, what if something happened to Chaincode or Brink? What would happen in those kinds of scenarios? Would they be a disaster?
I think if something happened to Chaincode, it would be a problem. I mean, it would be a problem because they fund so much good work. But I think the important thing is that we make Bitcoin development resilient to single points of failure. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to start Brink. We can't just rely on Chaincode to do all of the lifting, right? They do. I'm very grateful to all the work they do, but it shouldn't just be them funding everything. And they're not. There's also MIT DCI. There's also Square Crypto, Blockstream, DG, BitMEX, and OKCoin are funding grants. So it's, like I said a bit earlier, it is the most decentralized and distributed it's been in the history of Bitcoin. But let's keep moving in that direction, so that at some point maybe your question won't even be valid. Like at some point, if there are, say, 10 organizations funding Bitcoin, and the question was, what if one of those goes under? Then it's not a big deal.
Yeah. survivable. But that feels like there's been a lot of progress in the last 12 to 18 months. I think what Square are doing is quite interesting. It does feel, what you're doing now. It does feel like something's happened over this last 12 to 18 months. Interestingly, primarily during a bear market as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's getting better. I'm not gonna speculate on whether it's a market or not, but hopefully, if in 12 months' time Bitcoin is worth 10x, then a lot more people will be feeling generous with funding open source development.
We need to put some pressure on PayPal as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's the thing, though. If the price does continue to accelerate, there are going to be a lot more people who have an active interest in defending it. I mean, MicroStrategy is an interesting one because I spoke to Micah Saylor about that. He obviously invested $450 million of the money from his company, and then a massive amount of his own, something like $175 million. I mean, he's pushing aggregate value across his investments of around $750 million. He has an interest in protecting Bitcoin, and there will be lots of other people like that. I expect, like you say, over the coming years, especially, I mean, if Bitcoin was to do a 10x, there's plenty of individual people who will be quite Bitcoin wealthy. And I've seen some interesting things in people creating ways to support, like almost Patreon style support developers, where you can put $100 here, $200 there. But I guess that's, whilst that's good and that's helpful, in some ways having significant large chunks from an organization like you're building is probably a bit better. It's a lot less for the individual to worry about, knowing, okay, I've got this guaranteed amount of money every year coming from Brink.
Right. Yeah, it'll be a 12-month grant, potentially rolling over multiple years. I agree that the patron model is good and it's admirable that people want to do that. I have questions about the sustainability. I have questions about how people on the outside choose who to patronize.
Yeah,
it's very difficult from the outside to look at Bitcoin development and know who is making valuable contributions and who has a history of making valuable contributions. And I fear the risk is that the developers who are most active on social media will be the ones who receive the patronage, and the ones who are heads down doing useful, valuable work will not be as successful in raising funds that way. So that's one reason that I think Brink is a useful intermediary there, that I and the rest of the Brink team have a very good sense of who is working on the protocol, who's made valuable contributions, and who has the potential to keep doing that. And we can hold them to account a lot better than an individual patron who's giving $5 a month. We can say this person signed up for a grant and they said they would deliver this in 12 months, and they have, and here are the results. So I hope that's something that we can do.
Well, that's an example of where trust and kind of centralization of certain ideas work better. I would rather trust putting my money with someone like yourself, having known you for a while, knowing the work you do, knowing where you would put the money. Because like you said, I mean, it's not just the people active on social media. Some people just wouldn't be good at selling themselves. If I see a page of developers, how would I know? How would I know who to support?
And it tilts the incentive towards selling oneself rather than doing the work, right? If you're incentivized to sell yourself and market yourself to receive patronage, then you will spend proportionally more of your time and energy selling yourself and less time working on the code than if you can get a grant for a year where you don't need to worry about funding. You're successful in getting the grants, and then you work for 12 months on delivering the thing you said you would deliver. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't use patronage. If that works for people, great, and that's a different and yet another more diverse funding model. But I think there are advantages and disadvantages to it.
Have you set yourself any specific kind of targets?
Well, I'd like to hire 2 fellows this year, so that the onboarding / mentoring scheme is called the fellowship, and that will be full-time employees, essentially working in London out of the office here. I'd like to get 2 of those on board, and then the independent grants, as many as possible. As long as I can find people who are qualified and skilled and will use those grants well, the more I can fundraise for and award, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
But kind of fundraising targets in terms, obviously it'd be great if somebody comes to you and says, here, John, I'm going to write you a £1 million check. But do you take grants of all sizes? Like, would you take, sorry, not grants of all sizes, contributions of all sizes? And do you take them in pounds, dollars, and Bitcoin?
Certainly take them in dollars and Bitcoin, and probably can take them in pounds. Dollars I expect to be predominant because, that's how people make payments in the US, and they'll be able to write those off tax exempt. If people want to give Bitcoin, that's fine. We'll probably sell the Bitcoin for dollars. Unlike Michael Saylor, I don't have a $500 million treasury. All of the money will be working capital, so it would have to be in dollars to pay our expenses. But yeah, we would take donations. I think we have an explicit goal to have a diverse set of funders. It'd be better not to take more than, say, 25% of our funding from any one individual, just in case if that person goes away, then wouldn't destroy the business, or they don't have any undue influence over what we're doing. But yeah, we want to take funding from diverse people and organizations and put it to good use.
Have you set up you must have a website by now.
There will be one
in the process. There will be, and and will that be ready on Tuesday?
That'll be ready. Yeah, brink.dev.
Brink.dev, and that's going to explain. And can you donate online?
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Up to $5,000 worth.
Up to.
And anything higher than that, you'd need to contact us because of the regulations around nonprofits. We need to get your address and do our diligence because we're a legal entity. Can
you make lots of individual payments? So no, I don't mean it like that. So for example, if I wanted to contribute and a small amount of my profit and I wanted to just do it monthly, do you suddenly hit a level where then you would have to get in touch?
Yes, I think so. I think it's 5,000 a year. Above that, we need to put it on our annual filings as a 501c3.
So another a question, interesting. Now you're back in the UK. What do you feel about like the Bitcoin community, Bitcoin development? What's your feel for it here in the UK as opposed to the US? Because as you know, I've traveled out there extensively. Spent a lot of time in New York and San Francisco and LA, and there is a vibrant Bitcoin community. I've never really felt it here. Now, I don't know if that's my fault for not trying to stick my head into it and see where it exists, or if it just doesn't really exist. How have you found it?
Well, I've moved back in the midst of a pandemic, so there's no there's no community anywhere. There are a few organizations here that are working on Bitcoin. Nothing like what exists in New York and San Francisco. But there are people, and they just need to be connected, and we need to have a regular technical meetup, and that'll be the seeds of the community that will grow, I think, over time. So I certainly plan to spend some of my time working on that. As soon as things are open, we'll be doing regular technical meetups.
Well, there is one isn't there one? Is it Michael Folkestone? I forget his name.
Yep, Michael Folkestone has been running meetups. Yep.
Yeah. Will you be attending that, or do you think there'll be another different one? Like, will there be like a, like the one I've been to in New York or San Francisco? Or is
there'll be. I hope to start doing Socratic seminars, just like
Socratic,
like we've had in San Francisco and New York. Yep.
Yeah, I enjoy those. I have no idea what anyone's talking about, but I do enjoy going to them. Yeah, I feel like I've maybe personally neglected London, like sticking my head in there and seeing what's happening, or even trying to help and support. Like, how can I help and support you with this? I mean, obviously we can put the show out there. What other things can I do, or people listening do?
I think funding is what we need. Funding for Brink, so we can pay developers and pay grants. So I should say that the initial funding that I got from John and Vensis covers me and covers our admin costs. So the funding that comes in from now on will or go to grants and go to fellowships. So there's no kind of cut for us. It's a non-profit, so there's no equity for me, but it's good work. So I'm happy about that. In terms of how you can help, just the show and maybe fund a bit and come along to the meetups when we start them in London.
Is there any way of because what I don't understand is how much money goes how far? Like, is there like a general kind of average? Like if you had like $50,000, that would fund a dev for a year. Is there a certain range? Is there any way of kind of understanding that? Because I think one of the things is when I go out talking to people like this, they kind of want to understand amounts they can chew off. And so if I could say, so well, look, if you give $100,000 or $150,000, whatever the number is, that's probably going to fund, say, 2 developers. Is there any way of quantifying that?
Well, to be competitive, software developers, depending on where you are in the world, might be on 100,000, 150, 200.
Wow.
It might be lower than that, might be higher. The market is very different around the world. I know in like Silicon Valley, if you start at like a Google or a Facebook, you'll be starting on 6 figures plus, and it will go up from there. It might be lower in London, might be lower still in other parts of the world. But I would think for a skilled Bitcoin protocol developer, 6-figure dollars would be the starting point, and then up from there depending on experience.
Wow. Okay. So there's some quite ambitious funding targets that you've got to reach then.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're out there selling. You're knocking on doors, John.
I have been a bit. Once we go public, I will be doing a lot more of that. Yeah, but I should say, if you agree with me that Bitcoin is one of the most important projects in the world,
is the single most important project in the world.
It's the most important thing that humans have ever invented. Then we want to be competitive. We want the best people in the world working on this. And passion goes quite a long way, but people should be compensated according to their skill. And if they can earn twice as much going and working at Google, maybe we'll lose some of those people. So yeah, working on an open source project that you are passionate about means a lot, but you should also be compensated.
Well, I'm going to bash on some doors here. I'm going to moan at some people and tell them to give some money to you guys to help you out with it. Because actually, people have been very receptive, and I don't think it's just because I've put them on the spot in an interview and pressured them. I think they understand it. I think once you start talking to people about it, so especially say with actually both with the Winklevoss and when I spoke to Brian Armstrong at Coinbase, it wasn't just like a conversation on the interview. They both did follow-ups. They both asked questions. They wanted to speak to people. They wanted to understand more about it. They were very receptive, and I think perhaps sometimes you can get so busy building your business you forget about the importance of something like this. But when a light is shone upon it, I think like in both of those scenarios, they realized how important it is and how important it is for their business. Because without the open source developers, they don't have a business they can build upon. It becomes a lot more high risk.
Right. It's a platform that those companies are built on. So it is in their strategic interest that it continues to run. And I think there's maybe a misunderstanding outside the Bitcoin technical community about what Bitcoin protocol developers do. I think maybe people think that Bitcoin is done, that Satoshi released version 0.1, and there were a few bugs that were fixed in like 2011, and now we're done. And that the protocol is now ossified and there's no more work for developers. That's not the case. There's lots of work to do. There are quite frequently bugs that get fixed, and we don't necessarily make a lot of noise about it. And another thing to keep in mind is you should distinguish in your mind between changes to the protocol and work on the implementation, Bitcoin Core. So changes to the protocol are very infrequent. SegWit was the last one. Taproot will probably be the next one. And it's not something that we change very much. But that doesn't mean we're not doing any work. We're doing a lot of work on the implementation on Bitcoin Core. And there are parts around Bitcoin Core like the P2P stack, other parts of it, the build system, lots and lots of moving pieces to that software project that need continual maintenance. just like any other software project. So there's a lot of work, even if Bitcoin, the protocol does not change frequently, there's a lot of work for software developers. And if they're not doing that work and fixing bugs and testing releases, then the whole system could fail for some other reason. So yeah, go find your local Bitcoin protocol developer.
Adopt a Bitcoin developer. Will this ossification ever likely happen? Because I've heard it talked about.
I don't know if we'll ever reach a point where the protocol never changes again, but we're trending in that direction, and I expect that to continue. I don't think we'll see more frequent soft forks in the future. We might see more, but they will be less frequent. Maybe every 5 years or 10 years, But I don't know. I know as well as you.
Do you think we'll ever see a hard fork?
I'm not going to say never. I think it would be. It's almost religious zealotry to say never. Like if there was a critical protocol bug that could only be fixed with a hard fork, then we would hard fork, right? Because we want Bitcoin to continue.
Yeah.
I think it's unlikely in the near future, but I don't know. I
still imagine a scenario at some point block size will come up again and be discussed. I can imagine that.
Yeah, potentially.
I do. I can imagine if Bitcoin continues to grow and continues to be successful, continues to adoption continues, I can imagine that conversation comes up again. It will be highly controversial. It will be a civil war again, but I can see it coming up again. Well, okay, so before we finish up, what are you talked about the next release coming up that's going to have the code for Taproot. What beyond this, what are the other really interesting or really important things that are coming up for Bitcoin that need to be worked on?
I think digesting Taproot, like activating it, and then writing the code is the first thing. Well, no, let's go back even further. Thinking of the idea is the first thing, and that happened in like 2017, and then kind of refining that idea and writing the implementation, and then reviewing the implementation and getting it merged. That's where we are now. Next up is activation, and that's probably the most political, interesting part of it if you're into social dynamics. But then the work is not done at that point. The work continues, which is actually making use of those new features in the protocol, and that is something that will take several years, because you can make changes to Lightning that makes Lightning more efficient and better in many ways. You can have more interesting other more interesting contracts built on top of Taproot and Lightning that you can make safer multi-sig, all kinds of things. And so those products and contracts that are built on top of Schnoor and Taproot, I think that's probably the story of the next few years. It's just like such a large space of potential innovations you can create on top of that feature. It will take a long time to explore and fully exploit all of those possibilities. Not to say that other interesting work is not going on, like Zcash, AnyPrev out, OpCTV are other potential future forks, and those could allow other interesting contracts. But I think there's just so much to be done with Schnoor Taproot that'll be the focus for a lot of people. And
how are you feeling generally? I think this last 6 months has been very exciting. I think it's the one saving grace of these lockdowns and pandemics is the industry that we both work in. It's become super exciting. The interest in Bitcoin has grown, and probably in part because of the pandemic and the economic impact. But it's just been a really, really interesting 6 months for me. So do you echo that?
Yeah, I agree. On a personal level, the lockdown meant that initially I spent less time doing things like traveling and speaking at conferences and planning the residency, and more time working on the code, and that was really refreshing. Obviously doing less of that now because of Brink. But I agree, yeah, people have been doing really interesting things. It's a great time to be in Bitcoin.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Okay, tell people where to find out more information and what you want them to do.
Brink.dev. And you can find everything there.
Get your checkbooks out, get your ledger out, get your multi-sig wallet out, get your dollars out, your Bitcoin out, support open source development, support Brink, support John. Everything I can do to help, just let me know. But I'll certainly be trying to point some people in your direction. And if I ever blow this media business up into something, hopefully I can make a solid contribution at some point as well.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate that.
All right, mate. Take care, and I will see you soon.
Okay.
Okay, what do you think of that one? Did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy listening to John? Look, I love what John is doing. I think sponsoring and supporting devs is something that is often overlooked, and it's something I will definitely keep bringing up in interviews and keep pushing for people to do their bit. And I'll be sending some of them, hopefully, in John's direction. I also think it's really cool that this is happening in the UK. Most of these hubs of Bitcoin developers are in places like New York or San Francisco. So I love that he has grown that community in London. And once the lockdown is over, I will be heading down there to check out what he's doing and catch up with John at some point. Anyway, listen, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you listened to it. I know, as I said before, it's not as exciting as talking about a $500,000 Bitcoin, but do you know what? A $500,000 Bitcoin means nothing without funded developers. So I'm glad you listened. I'm glad you got this far. Hopefully you share it out, and we'll keep putting the pressure on to get more money into Bitcoin dev. If you've got any questions, you do want to reach out to me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. I do reply to everyone, so please feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions. Also, if you want to support the show, please just go and leave me a review on iTunes. It takes a couple of minutes. 5 stars if you think I deserve it. 1 star if you think the show's shit. But, please email me first. Let me know why. Outside of that, have a great weekend. Love you all. Forgot to say. Also, check out Defiance. Episode 4 of Chaos is out. That's at defiance.news. And like I say, have a great weekend. I love you all, and I will see you all next week.